I feel it so from head to toe, leading and feeding my body. I stick to the code, I never fold. No weapon on earth can harm me. God bless my foes, I'm out of control, teaching this God body. I'm reaching my God body, deeper than Bob Marley. Racing with Ricky Bobby. We street tested and invest in a wide body, no rest. The streets are test, but we risk it and connect with Poppy Divine. But we doing time cause our lines was moving sloppy. They watch me, they wanna pop me, they watch me, I swear they watch me. I'm Islam mixed with the hustle, I'm Malcolm in a Maserati. I'm chasing elevation, frustrating Illuminati. I'm Huey leading the Panthers with answers, no one can stop me. I broke the code of the Matrix, it's basic, I'm printing copies. I'm repping for Harriet Tubman, she got me, they'll never knock me. And it's they'll never knock me. I know she got
running through the street when the money don't need. Say we need some money for some food to eat. Said it's hard, said it's hard, you know. Running through the street when the money don't need. Say we need some money for some food to eat. Said it's hard, said it's hard, you know.
I'm on the middle step on the stairway to heaven. I'm coming as one but guarded by 11. My whole circle driven and all of us brethren. We using our visions as tools for manifesting. Manifesting all types of blessings. And I can't say the last time this brother seen a reverend. It's been a while since I sat down on the pew, but I can keep my head down, stay on the grind and pay my dues. Hey, I can spot a mountain, I can climb it too. I can spot a broken bridge and replace the missing screws. See a team of young kings and lace them with some Jews. I can play the game of life, hey, and never really lose. I could pull up in a photo coupe with no fumes. I can live a whole life and never see a tomb. I can find the right wife and forever be a groom. I can plant a million seeds and watch a million blooms. Stay in tune, stay in tune.
God vibes only. God vibes only.
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Combos Podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos Podcast. I'm your humble host, Harut. And this is a special Patreon show, so big up to y'all. All right, indeed. Before we start rolling, I want to see who's in the building. So if you could go ahead and let yourself be known, and I'm gonna copy the link in here because this show is going to be interactive, and I know, a lot of our Patreons are not necessarily geared to be able to, go ahead and I think that's much better. Tune into these shows when I have them going live and stuff like that. But I really want this thing to be real interactive and stuff like that. So I'm trying to find a sweet spot in timing, and see if we can make it happen that way or whatnot. But, whoever's in there, you're more than welcome to join onto the show, because this is, like I said, this is a research show. This is a very interactive show. It's something that me and Ra have been talking about for some time. And, I'm going to just show you kind of what we're thinking about, where we're heading with this topic. And I don't know why it's not doing this the right way. And, where we can, maybe get some input or whatnot. So definitely big up to that. So you guys saw the cover art. You saw the promo here on Patreon and stuff like that. We are developing a chart for Black America, right? And I'm going to tell you where kind of the inspiration from this came from. So, I don't know how many of you all are, hip to, the app Clubhouse and stuff like that. And, I get on Clubhouse and stuff like that. We've done some things, with the podcast on Clubhouse. We actually probably have something that we are in the works of doing that's going to be real big for the podcast. Real big for the astrology world, especially the Black, astrology world. That kind of got kicked off on Clubhouse. Once upon a time, we're gonna put that together. The details will come soon and stuff like that. But we was talking on on Clubhouse, and I got in a conversation with some people from ADOS, and that's American Descendants of Slaves, the actual organization. And what happens on Clubhouse when you're on rooms and you're talking and stuff like that, people go and they check out your Instagram and different things like that. And one of the people on the stage was like, "Oh, so Harut, I see you're into astrology and stuff like that. So can you predict the future? How do you feel about Black America? Are we going to get reparations and different things like that?" And they start having that conversation, and it just kind of sparked the idea, like, what, we probably should have a chart for Black America, right? So Ra and I was talking about it a little bit, and we had some ideas that come across and stuff like that, So the reason why I wanted this show to be interactive, because a lot of us, are historians and different things like that, and we study things, we look at things, we know different information, little tidbits where to find different things that can probably refine the chart for Black America. And I think this might be a multi-part show, right? Because there's a lot of different ideas, a lot of different ideology in regards to Black America, and how would you chart it, right? So just to give you a couple of different perspectives on the subject, right? So when we're talking about Black America, of course, we're talking about, Africans, brought over here from slavery over here to the United States, specifically. I think that, some of the other countries that were impacted by this, Brazil, of course, Jamaica, and, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and all that stuff like that. The way that you would look at this would be slightly different, because one major difference between people who were slaves here in America, the United States, specifically, in relation to the West Indies, to the Caribbean, is that, after colonization, we didn't get a country. So our West Indian brothers and sisters, they have a country. So you can pretty much use the chart for their actual country to kind of gauge, where they're at as a people. But for us, or for me, and people like me who are, descendants or ascendants of, people that were enslaved here in this country, you have to, there's a couple different points, right? So let's go over the first one, right? When you talk about, the whole 1619 ideology, right? So that's one perspective of calculating a chart for Black America, 1619, right? But, the problem with calculating a chart like that from the point of 1619 is that Black people were here before 1619. And I'm not even talking about Black people who traveled over here outside of the vehicle of slavery. I'm talking about actual Black people that were over here in this country, that got here via European settlers, right? They were here before 1619. So it's really not a good point. I understand that date that they chose, but it really doesn't reflect the reality of just kind of the whole Black American experience or whatnot. So, 1619 is one that you could probably look at. You could probably get something from it, but I don't think it's a strong chart, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening now, right? And I guess this is a good opportunity to just, kind of give some background just on mundane astrology in general, right? So, mundane astrology, of course, is, a type of astrology when you evaluate, large masses of people, right? And we're talking about countries, nations, cities. You could probably even do a county if it was significant enough to even look at it like that. Groups of people, tribes, different things like that, businesses, all of that falls under the realm of mundane astrology, right? So when we're looking at, trying to find a chart for Black America, we have to look at it from the prism of mundane astrology, right? And, from studying those teachings, what you will find is that oftentimes countries have multiple charts, especially old countries like India. India has been essentially India for a long time, but there are multiple charts for India. The most commonly used chart today for India is the chart that India erected when they got independence from the British. That's the most commonly used chart today, but people still evaluate some older charts, some elder charts of India that reflect different times, right? So it's really, I say all that to say is that it's really dependent upon the astrologer, how they view, their teachings, different things like that. And what are you actually looking for? Okay. So that's, kind of bring us to Black Americans here, right? There's some very key things that you got to look at when you're evaluating Black Americans, and if you want to try to do it from a chart perspective, right? First thing, right? What's the most, you got to look for key events, key activities that kind of set the stage for, where we're at now, right? So for me, I think this is the strongest case for it is looking at it from the perspective of when Black people were actually freed from slavery, right? So, that brings in controversy in its own, because on one hand, you're like, okay, when did Black people actually were able to physically leave the plantation? That's one time. And then you have a time where there was a threat to end slavery. And then you had the time where a promise to end slavery was enacted, right? And at what point do you start tracking time, right? So this is a very interesting perspective, right? So before I even pull up a chart, and like I said, just like I said, this is a chart. This is a episode exclusive to the patrons. That's really built on trying to fine tune everything and just getting some input in regards to what you may know. There's certain information that I don't know about certain things, and I've researched, I've looked around. Some people may have done a little digger deeper than I have, and may have came, to a conclusion or be able to offer some information that can make our chart better. So I'm going to share my screen for a bit. Let's go here. Alrighty. Hopefully everybody can see this, right? All right. So I'm going to stick at this point here in regards to dealing with the chart for Black America from the perspective of when the announcement. So, of course, if you study history, you know about the Emancipation Proclamation, right? So, just some background on that. The Emancipation Proclamation, in itself, when it was signed, did not free the slaves. But what actually happened, right, during I think the second or third year of the Civil War, Lincoln actually signed it, right? So, we can clear up a couple myths there. Like, a lot of people think that the Civil War was actually fought over slavery, and it wasn't. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, the Civil War was already live and kicking, right? And another key point about the Emancipation Proclamation is that it only applied to the states that were in rebellion, right? So certain states, borderline states and stuff like that, that wasn't a part of the Confederate Army, that had slaves that wasn't necessarily a part of this whole Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves, right? So that's a key point. And then we know that, Lincoln wasn't necessarily 100% sold on freeing the slaves, but he figured that, since the Confederate Army had black people, black slaves working in the Confederate Army and the Confederate military, that it was actually giving them an advantage, right? So, a lot of people don't realize that, and I I'm bad about saying, repeat. I got phrases and I say it all the time. Like somebody was like, if you say whatnot one more time, I do that sometimes. So forgive me. But, you had slaves that worked in the medic crew, right? That was helping Confederate soldiers recover from injuries, different things. You had black people actually, of course, in, actual battle, right? They were actually, Confederate soldiers, right? And there was such a large amount of black people in the South at that time that was creating a significant disadvantage for the Union, or whatnot. They were working, in, food support, different things like that, feeding the troops, right? Helping to, import and export, sell different things like that. The actual economy, they were the backbone of the economy for the Confederacy at that time. So with black people being slaves for the Confederate Army at that time was a tremendous asset for them and giving them an advantage in the war. So what we know about Lincoln at that time, when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, this was a war tactic. It was an attempt for him to get an advantage for the Union to be able to subdue the Confederacy, right? So these are kind of the motivations, right? And what we learn is that, he actually put out a threat of the Emancipation Proclamation to the states in the Confederacy that were in open rebellion, right? And he did that. He set that out at noon of September 22nd, 1860. What was that? 3? No. September 22nd, 1862. All right? And we know that he signed it in noon. That's good news, right? We got like an actual time and date. Okay? Or whatnot. Right? So what he did back in September 22nd, 1862 is he put out the threat to the Confederate Army and said, hey, look, if you don't come out of rebellion by January 1st, 1863, I will sign the Emancipation Proclamation and state that all the slaves that are in states that are in open rebellion to the Union, okay, will be freed. Okay? So that was a threat to them. So it kind of altered the world, not the world. It altered the war quite a bit. And it also, that word got to the slaves, so it changed the way that they were interacting with the Confederate Army and stuff like that, right? So, just a quick, trip down, memory lane, right? If you study history, what actually happened was that they didn't, the different states that was in rebellion, they stayed in rebellion, right? So then come January 1st, 1863, that's when Lincoln actually signed the Emancipation Proclamation, okay? Right? And now, the other important point here is that when that Emancipation Proclamation was signed, right, it wasn't that the slaves were automatically freed from there, right? But the reason why, me personally, why I state that the Emancipation Proclamation, the announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation being the starting point is important because it initiated the activity, right? So when we break this down and we look at, let me get some good. There we go. So when we look at astrology, right, and the way that we approach it, it's the beginning activity, right? So from that moment of when that Emancipation Proclamation was signed, all things at that point started moving towards, black people being freed. So that's why, I and Ra agrees with me on that regard, is that, this is a good point in the March, to be able to mark the chart, right? And like I said, I'm not going to get too deep into the actual specifics of these different charts, but it will be, something good that we'll look at and we will consider, right? And like I said, I know, if you got some insight, anything that you want to put to this, any other information that that you didn't hear me go over at this time, definitely feel free to jump into the chat. You can type it or you can actually be on here. And one thing that's that you may want to know as well is that, these shows do not go to the public, right? These shows are unlisted, YouTube videos. Only the people with the link, people on Patreon, can even see. All right. So, something like that, you won't be showed to the world. You'll just be showed to the other patrons or whatnot. So big up. All right. So, for kicks and giggles, though, let's go ahead and I want to show you all a particular chart, right? That's it. All right, let's get Britney Spears off of here real quick. And there we go. All right. Just for kicks and giggles, right? I told you that the threat for the Emancipation Proclamation, for lack of a better term at this point, was set in September 22nd, 1862. Okay? At noon, right? I actually have documentation that states that this actually occurred at noon. So let me show you that statement real quick so you don't think I'm joshing you. That's an old word I pulled out, joshing. Where is it at? I think this is the link right here. It's not that one. Let's try this one real quick. Not that one. I think it might be here. Let's see. Nope, not that one. I'll find it in a second. But nonetheless, we do have evidence that this Emancipation Proclamation was actually not the emancipation, but the threat for it that happened on September 22nd was actually put into action at noon on September 22nd, 1862. All right, so if we was to erect a chart from there, Okay, we're drawing Black America. Let's see if we that was interesting. Let's put this back here. All right. So when you do that, that will actually set the chart as a Scorpio ascendant in Jesta. All right. With a Rahu in the ascendant. Okay. So you got Rahu sitting here in the first house and K2 in the seventh house. That's that first seventh axis for Rahu and K2. Remember that they're always opposite of each other. Okay. That will put the first lord in the fifth house in intelligence, creativity, children. Right? Mars sitting there in the 12th house. Put the mind, the kind of general, personality of the people into Leo, right? And Venus conjunct it, right? So we're talking about Leo is an interesting sign. What I've discovered is that in Western astrology, Leo has a different kind of representation than what it does in Vedic astrology. Leo is oftentimes likened to, just wanting attention, people being good actors, showmen, and different things like that. But in truth, Leo is a lion, and a lion just is. You understand what I'm saying? Like a lion sometimes can have those qualities, but all the people that I know with Moon and Leo are not attention seekers. Not really. Some people are, but there's other reasons for that play more into that type of disposition than the actual moon itself. That placement. Leo is a king. And it may not be an actual king, but they function like a king, right? It's a manager. It's a leader. You understand what I'm saying in regards to managing people, leading people, right? Aries is a leader, but from a different perspective. It's more of what you would think of a leader from a Western perspective, someone who leads, their leadership is legitimized by their actual, aggression. You understand what I'm saying? And, ability to assert themselves and, to be able to, be competitive and all those different things, right? That's a different type of leadership than what you get with a Leo, right? Because when Moon's in Leo, it's a leadership that's based on, the ability to sit in the middle of things and to almost play like the quarterback of a team, right? To be able to see the talents in all the people that's around you and be able to organize them and stuff like that. A lot of times Leo, will go down and do the dirty work, and this really depends on the nakshatra, right? The kind of asterism or flavor of Leo that someone's moon is in will kind of, tell you how much of, they lean into this type of behavior or not lean into it or whatnot. But, they can get their hands dirty, but their strength is in managing people, right? So at this September 22nd chart, 1862 at noon, you see the moon for, a possible chart for Black America sitting there. It's in the 10th house, right? 10th house of, status. It can be career and different things like that, but it's really like status, right? Venus is there with it. In the 11th house, you got Jupiter, Sun, Saturn. Sun and Saturn together. That's interesting, right? 12th house, you got Mercury and Libra. Okay? Scorpio. I could almost buy it. This is not a bad chart. And I think it does have some actual credence. It actually has, you can look at this chart and be able to tell something about Black people from this particular chart. Without a doubt. You can, right? The question is this the actual chart, right? So, let's dig into the history a little bit, right? Let's see if this is a good place for us to try to, mark the chart, right? So let's go here, and I actually found it. So let's go back to this section. All right. Sitting here is a good source, Smithsonian, right? I'm not gonna read this whole article, right? So let's just start here. Let's start. So on July 20th, 1862, John Hay, Lincoln's private secretary, predicted in a letter that the president will not conserve slavery much longer. 2 days later, Lincoln, wearing his familiar dark frock coat and blah, 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 right, convened with his cabinet in his cramped White House office upstairs in the East Wing. He had dwelt much and long on the subject of slavery. Lincoln then read a 325-word first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation intended to free slaves in Confederate areas not under United States authority, right? These are states that are in rebellion, right? Salmon P. Chase, Secretary of Treasury, stated that he would give the measure his cordial support. Secretary of State William Henry Seward, however, advised delay until a more auspicious period. Interesting, right? When demonstrable momentum on the battlefield had been achieved by the Union. Okay? So again, this kind of points to what I was saying earlier about it being more of a military tactic, more than a moral kind of, appeal. Lincoln concurred, right? Agreed with a better time, awaiting a propitious moment to announce his decision and continuing to revise the document, all right? So here's where I get that time from. At noon, one of the places. At noon on Monday, September 22nd, 1862, it doesn't say it here, but that's when it happened, Lincoln again gathered the cabinet at the White House. Union troops had stopped the Confederate Army advance into Maryland at the Battle of Antietam on September 17. The president saw the now operated from a position of greater strength. Secretary of Navy Gildon Wells later observed that Lincoln remarked that he had made a covenant that if God gave us victory, it was his duty to move forward in the cause of emancipation. All right. So what he did, September 22nd, he let the record be straight that, okay, we feel like we're going to win the war. Okay. And, if you don't get out of rebellion, all right, by January 1st, 1863, this is what we're going to do when you lose the war. So he actually gave the Confederate troops an out. Okay. That, we could end this war right now, and we don't even have to talk about slavery right now. Because he believed in the back of his mind that slavery will become more irrelevant and it would phase itself out anyway. So he really wasn't willing to wager that at the start of the war. That wasn't his beef. His whole objective for the war was to get the country to function as one, as a quote unquote union, right? Instead of essentially two different states. All right. Now, the key thing about that is that, there's a lot of different astrologers out there who like to entertain the idea of, the United States actually having a different ascendant than the ascendant that, a lot of people, one guy in particular, I can't call his name right now, but maybe what I'll do is I'll post the article in there for you to just view, not download, not to share with anybody, but to read it. And this guy did significant research in rectifying, the chart for not Black America, but for the United States itself, right? And this chart comes up with the time of, not a time, but a ascendant of Sagittarius for the United States, right? So that's where we get this chart from. It's based on significant research. I mean, really digging into journals and all different types of things to, rectify this chart. So that puts the United States as a Sagittarius ascendant, right? And those of you who know your fundamentals of astrology, you know that Sagittarius is a dual sign. So when you have an ascendant that's leading a country of a dual sign, you know you're going to have a dual nature of it. And it still even plays out today. Still a certain, stigma, different things that come with people from the North. And there's a stigma and different things that comes with people from the South. Well, back then you have this, civil war, less than, 100 years after the country has been officially established, so they're not on the same page. So that was Abraham Lincoln's primary focus, in engaging the Civil War and different things. He really wanted to, have the South function as a part of the overall Union, and not necessarily get into all these different things and different, perspectives and culture that the South was into at the time. And then he used slavery as kind of like a tactic to help achieve that goal. All right. So, with that being said, we're looking here at the chart for the United States. Right? Sagittarius ascendant. Look at all those, planets sitting there in that 7th house. That's interesting, right? Of whatnot. The moon, the mind of the United States is in Aquarius, Shata Bishop, right? That nakshatra, okay? It's in the 3rd house. We're dealing with technology, innovation, different things like that, right? I mean, no one can doubt that the United States has been, one of the primary drivers of innovation. And you want to tell you another interesting about that is a lot of the fundamental inventions that the country is built on were inventions created by black people, right? The moon is in a Saturn-ruled sign, Aquarius. And in astrology, Saturn is often equated to darker people, right? So when you look at the chart for the United States, Saturn it can be the black people of this chart. If you're looking at, specific things from that, right? And, the relevance of bringing that up is that a lot of the inventions in this country were brought about from the black people. Even something down to as fundamental that we use all today, the traffic signal, created by black people. The foundations to biotechnology, black people. Blood transfusion, black people, and so on and so on and so on, or whatnot. So here's what you see with that, right? And then you bring it over. Look here at this pre-Black American chart. It's interesting. It's an interesting chart. I think you can look at it and gain something from it. All right. But, let's go to the actual date that I believe is the time. And we're going to go to the date of the actual signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. And let me just find. There we go. Boom. All right. All right. So here it is, January 1st, 1863. And I have it set at noon. Okay. First controversial aspect of this chart is that we don't have a solid time. Noon is a good time, but I'm really searching for more evidence. So those of you who watch it, if you're watching it now, you watch it on the playback, feel free to do some information and go ahead and post it here in Patreon, so we can go look into it and stuff like that and really, rectify a real strong chart, right? But let's just, for time's sake and everything, just look at it. Let's say if we want to put, the chart for Black America here when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, let's say that this happened at noon. Okay? All right? That puts black people as a Pisces ascendant. Right? Moon in the third house. Exalted. This is a strong chart. Right? Exalted in Taurus. Right? In the nakshatra. No. It's actually. No. Yeah. In the nakshatra that, the moon is exalted in. Very strong. Right? But you also see K2 there. We just did a show on this, right? Moon and K2 together is not the best combination. Right? Moon, close to the nodes is just not the best combination, right? Because the nodes come in things and screws things up, creates interesting things, can also create mental illness, mental confusion, different things like that, right? So that's sitting there. Black people, I could buy that a little bit. We got Mars in the second house, in its own sign, in Ashwini. Mars and Aries in the second house. It's interesting, right? We're talking about values. We're talking about personal income, the economics of black people, different things, right? This shows like aggression towards those areas of life. Right? Saturn sitting in Virgo, seventh house of partners, different things like that, right? Marriage, quote unquote, foreign affairs, different things like that, right? 10th house got a lot of different things going on. You get it's ruled by Sag. You got Mercury, Venus, and Sun sitting there, right? You got the ascendant Lord sitting in the 8th house in Libra, right? You got Rahu in the 9th, unconventional. It's interesting. This is an interesting chart. The placements are the placements, right? But what will change this is if we find a time, right? We find a time that link inside the chart. This may change the orientation of the chart, whatnot. But when we analyze it, just looking at the different placements, and let's ignore the houses for the second, this is a relatively strong chart. There aren't any debilitated planets, right? I don't like the moon being that close in the same house and everything like that with K2, but the moon is exalted. So, I mean, if you're going to have moon conjunct K2, the moon being exalted helps for sure. Helps stabilizes the moon. Rahu and Scorpio. It's a little aggressive, right? It's a little aggressive. Now, I will add that both charts will have Rahu and Scorpio. Pretty much all these placements stay the same except for Sun, Mars, and Mercury, and Moon. Everything else moves. Pisces ascendant. Maybe. You can make the case for it, but we want to be exact. We want to know what we're talking about when we talk about this thing. Right? So, that's kind of the task here, and I want you guys to definitely check out the playback, listen to this thing all the way, and think about it. See if you come across a book, come across some information, different things like that, and see if you can solidify a time that we can see when the actual Emancipation Proclamation was signed, because he did sign it on January 1st, 1863. In a journal or different things like that, you may find when he actually did it and during that day. That's the key to us sealing the chart and being able to move from there. And from there, we can look at and see just the collective destiny of Black Americans here. Even in regards to something like reparations, different things like that, we can analyze this. And we will do a show on this, right? We may do multiple shows on this because, it's a lot of factors that play in. I mean, Black people play a major role in this country, for sure. Foundation of this country, the actual labor of this country and everything like that goes with it. So this will be a bombshell, I think an excellent chart for us to do. But I think it'll be even better if we can get you guys' help. All right. So, I left a little time, like right here, we're about like at 50 minutes, 40 some minutes and stuff like that. So I really wanted, you guys to come in and be able to chime in and let this be an interactive experience like that. But feel free to, check this out. Put your comments in the comments either on YouTube or here on Patreon, and then we can converse from there. Post your links, post your resources, different things like that, and then we can build from there. All right? But if there's not any questions, I'm going to go ahead and leave this right here. And then we will definitely probably chime in on a part 2 of this or whatnot. But I definitely want you guys' input so we can pull off this excellent show we got planned. Chart for Black America. All right. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for definitely supporting us, being patrons. And like I say, I promise we're going to do more shows. We got more stuff coming up. I got another show that's scheduled. We're going to look at the BASA system with our guy, with Kevin Samuels and stuff like that. I meant to do that show much earlier, but we're going to look at that, and we're going to introduce a slightly concept of a 3/4 chart. More on that on tomorrow when we actually do the chart. And actually, I might have to push it back because we had to reschedule our show tonight. That's why I'm doing this right now. So we're going to reschedule the show for tomorrow, but maybe we can chime in earlier. Just keep an eye on Patreon, and you'll see it when we have it scheduled. And we got other things planned as well and whatnot. But again, like I said, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back with another exclusive episode for you all, and we'll be back with the public episode for everybody as well. We're going to do Dr. Dre and his whole situation, so stay tuned for that. All right? So you guys be safe out there, and I'm out. Peace.